Justice is often pictured as cold, blind, holding a set of scales, weighing right against wrong with no room for feeling. But the justice I've seen, the justice I believe in, is not cold at all. It's alive. It breathes humanity. It listens as well as it judges. It doesn't look away from wrongdoing, but it also doesn't forget that behind every mistake is a person, a beating heart, a story, a life trying to find its way. True justice isn't simply about evening the scales. True justice is about lifting people when they stumble, guiding them back onto the path rather than pushing them off it completely. The greatest verdicts don't end with a gavel. They begin with a spark of understanding, one that can turn a wrong turn into a turning point. I remember a young man who came before the court one winter morning. He couldn't have been more than 24 or 25. His face was tired, his clothes a little worn, and when he spoke, his voice trembled, not from arrogance, but from exhaustion. He had unpaid parking tickets stacked against him, and the fines had ballooned far beyond what he could pay. On paper, it looked simple. He broke the rules, he owed the money, but life is rarely as simple as paper makes it seem. I asked him about his situation, and he told me he was working 2 jobs, overnight at a warehouse and afternoons delivering food, just to keep his younger siblings in school and food on the table. His parents were gone, and responsibility had arrived at his door before his youth had even had a chance to leave. When I asked why he hadn't paid the tickets, he looked down at his shoes. "Judge, I had to choose between paying for parking fines or buying groceries. I chose my family." He said it softly, but there was no defiance in his tone, no excuse, just the plain, unvarnished truth. I could have levied the fines and been done with it. I could have added another weight to a load he was already straining to carry. But what would that have accomplished? Would that have taught him to be more responsible? Or would it have simply ground him down, one more shove against a young man already struggling to stay on his feet? So instead of handing him a punishment, I gave him something rarer in a courtroom: time. I told him that if he could stay on track, show proof of his efforts, and meet me halfway, I'd do what I could to help him clear those fines without crushing his future. His eyes widened, almost as if he didn't believe what he'd heard. That small act of understanding didn't excuse what he did wrong, but it gave him room to do better. And he did. Months later, he came back, proud and steady, with his records in hand. He'd kept his word. And because someone chose to believe in him rather than condemn him, he started to believe in himself. That's the kind of justice that inspires change. Justice isn't about turning a blind eye to mistakes. It's about recognizing the human being behind those mistakes. When you look past the offense to see the person, you don't weaken justice. You strengthen it. You transform it from a hammer into a hand extended to pull someone up. I think about how many times in life we're all called to sit in judgment, not behind a bench, not wearing a robe, but in the everyday moments where we decide how to treat people. Maybe it's a coworker who slips up, a child who tests your patience, a stranger who cuts you off in traffic. We all have our own little courtrooms, whether we realize it or not. In those moments, we pass verdicts. We decide whether to meet mistakes with anger, indifference, or understanding, and each verdict we render shapes not just the person before us, but also the kind of people we're becoming. The truth is, anyone can enforce rules. It doesn't take wisdom to punish, but it does take wisdom and courage to guide. The world has plenty of punishment. What it's starving for is fairness wrapped in humanity. A father who disciplines but doesn't crush his child's spirit. A teacher who corrects without humiliating. A boss who holds employees accountable but still lifts them up when they fail. That's real leadership. That's real justice. Sometimes people confuse kindness with weakness, but it's exactly the opposite. It's easy to slam the gavel, easy to say, "You're wrong, now pay the price." What's harder is to pause, to listen, to take the time to understand what brought someone to that point, and then to craft a response that doesn't just punish but actually helps. That takes strength. That takes wisdom. That takes heart. When I think back to that young man, I don't remember the fine or the paperwork or even the case number. I remember the look on his face when he realized someone cared enough to see him, not just his mistake, but him. And I wonder how many people in our lives are waiting for us to see them the same way. How many chances do we have every day to inspire someone to do better simply by treating them as if they're capable of better? Justice is a powerful thing. But when justice is combined with humanity, it becomes something even greater. It becomes transformative. It becomes the kind of justice that doesn't just balance the scales, it tips them toward hope. It's the kind of justice that says, "I believe in you enough to give you a chance." And when people are given a chance, more often than not, they rise to meet it. I've seen it in courtrooms, in classrooms, in homes, and workplaces. I've seen people who were written off as hopeless become responsible, kind, productive members of society because someone refused to write them off, because someone cared enough to see not just what they'd done, but who they could be. That's a lesson I think we all need to carry with us. Whether you're wearing a robe and holding a gavel, or wearing an apron behind a counter, or just walking down the street, you have influence. You're passing judgments every single day, whether you realize it or not. And the question is, are those judgments crushing people, or are they building them? Are you choosing to be a hammer, or are you choosing to be a hand? Every time you decide to meet a mistake with fairness and humanity, you don't just change someone else, you change yourself. You become a little wiser, a little stronger, a little more compassionate. And that ripples out. People remember when they've been treated with dignity, especially when they didn't deserve it. That memory doesn't fade. It shapes how they treat others. It creates a chain of change, one act of fairness leading to another, one spark of humanity lighting another flame. The young man with the parking tickets, he paid them off, yes, but more importantly, he carried something away from that courtroom that no fine or penalty could ever give him. He carried the understanding that justice isn't always there to tear you down. Sometimes it's there to help you stand taller. And because of that, he started showing that same understanding to the people in his own life. That's how it spreads. That's how lives are changed, not just by punishment, but by the kind of justice that sees people for who they are and believes in who they can become. So when life places you in a position to pass judgment, and it will, remember this: you have the power to do more than punish. You have the power to inspire. You have the power to lift someone higher than they've ever stood, simply by choosing fairness laced with humanity. True justice doesn't just end with a verdict. True justice begins with hope, and hope is what changes people. Hope is what changes the world.